Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into, well, one of the oldest and most profound
Yeah.
questions facing humanity. What is the true relationship between financial success and genuine fulfillment?
Yeah, and today we're really analyzing that complex connection, the often counterintuitive link between wealth and happiness. We're specifically looking at the hidden psychological costs that often come with chasing that success.
Exactly. Our mission in this deep dive is to kind of serve as your guide through this stack of sources we've looked at. We've got interviews with billionaires, psychological studies, some pretty intense nautical history.
And even astonishing medical breakthroughs, all aimed at helping you, the listener, identify the true non-monetary ingredients of a fulfilled life. We want to dismantle that pervasive assumption that just getting more money automatically solves everything else.
Right. So let's start with a thought experiment. It immediately grounds the analysis,
Yeah.
forces us to confront our core priorities.
Mhm.
I want you listening right now make an immediate gut level choice. Would you rather make $100,000 a year, but have a loving spouse, kids who genuinely admire you, excellent health, and a clear, quiet conscience?
Or option B, make 10 times that, a cool $1 million a year. But have none of those things. No stable family, maybe persistent illness, a conscience kind of burdened by questionable decisions.
The answer is, well, it's overwhelmingly obvious, isn't it?
Almost everyone instantly goes for the $100 case scenario.
Exactly. In that moment of reflection, everyone chooses the $100,000 with the core human stuff intact. And that obvious instant answer, that's really the foundation for this whole deep dive.
Our goal is to explore precisely why money fails so spectacularly to provide those non-monetary essentials, and maybe why we so often lose sight of that initial fundamental priority when we look at the lives of others.
Yeah, which is where we run headfirst into what you call the illusion of perfection, this idea that success in one area, like money, implies success everywhere else.
Right. The picture we project onto others, especially the wealthy and famous, it's almost always incomplete, We're experts at filling in the blanks with these, idealized versions of their lives.
And that idealized picture is just the perfect breeding ground for envy. It can even afflict people who are already, right at the very top.
Oh, absolutely.
I found that historical anecdote in our sources about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson just so powerful. It shows this toxic comparison happening even at the end of these extraordinary lives.
It's a stunning piece of history, really. These two giants of American politics, former presidents, lifelong rivals, complex relationship.
Right.
So July 4th, 1826, John Adams is on his deathbed. He knows he's dying, but he's still measuring himself against Jefferson. His very last words were basically rivalry and jealousy. He whispered, "Thomas Jefferson still lives."
Wow. And the staggering, heartbreaking irony
Is that Adams had no way of knowing Jefferson had actually died just a few hours earlier, same day.
he wasted his last breath envying a man who was already gone.
It's the ultimate proof, isn't it? We envy a highlight reel or a perceived moment that isn't even real. We project perfect longevity onto others even as our own life ends.
And we do the same thing, projecting, like domestic bliss or spiritual peace, onto the ultra-wealthy. And we're often just as wrong.
That's where the data comes in. We see that specifically when looking at, say, domestic stability among the economic elite. Our sources highlighted some compelling, if maybe a bit cynical, data challenging that idea that huge wealth means a harmonious private life.
What did it show?
Well, it looked at the 10 richest men in the world. A tiny sample, sure, but universally envied for their financial power, right?
Okay.
7 out of those top 10 have been divorced at least once. And collectively, among just those 10 men, there are 13 divorces.
13 divorces among the top 10 richest men.
Yeah.
That's staggering, especially given, the resources they have.
Yeah.
Best lawyers, therapy, everything.
Precisely. That figure is significantly worse than the national average in many places. This is the most envied group on the planet, achieving unimaginable financial success, yet they have this markedly higher failure rate in an area marriage stable family that almost every study says is critical for long-term happiness.
It's clear evidence right there. Financial success doesn't shield you from emotional turmoil or relationships falling apart.
Yeah, it really sets the stage perfectly for the core tension here. Money can't buy the essential ingredients of a good life. Even at the highest levels, the basic struggles, health, relationships, inner peace, they don't just vanish.
So, why do we keep chasing it like it's the ultimate solution?
Well, that brings us directly into the psychological trap, the thing that keeps us chasing more, often called the money treadmill.
And that trap, it starts with a really simple cognitive bias, doesn't it? Our sources point to this recurring trend. seen everywhere. Ask people how much money they need to be truly happy.
And the answer is remarkably consistent. They almost always say they need about twice what they currently make.
Right. The $30K earner says $60 is the magic number.
And the person making $1 million is sure that $2 million will finally bring contentment. It happens right across the board. But the question is, why does that goalpost keep moving, even when the financial reality is so different?
It's because we make this critical error in diagnosis, I think. We confuse the symptoms of unhappiness, stress, anxiety, lack of freedom with the cause. And we link those feelings to the most obvious, measurable lack in our lives, which is often money.
Exactly. It's just easy to see more money as this universal solvent for all your problems. You think, if I fix the money problem, the anxiety must disappear too.
But then people actually get that raise, that 50% or 100% increase.
And they find the new car is nice, maybe the bigger house is slightly better, but the underlying issues, the anxiety, the sense of meaninglessness, the stress in the marriage, they don't vanish. They just change shape or stick around.
And here's the treadmill part. When the money doesn't solve the internal problem, the easiest conclusion for our brains to jump to is,
The amount must have been just slightly off. If only I had $2 million instead of $1 million, then I'd be happy.
right. This expectation bias traps you in this relentless cycle, always chasing the next doubling, assuming that leap will fix the fundamental flaw the previous leap failed to fix.
It's a profound paradox, really, because most of what makes people truly happy, family connections, good sleep, health, a sense of purpose, it has almost nothing to do with money, past a certain basic comfort level.
And the moment that realization hits someone who's ultra successful, it can be devastating.
Yeah. They've potentially sacrificed the core ingredients, time with family, maybe health, for the means to buy things they hoped would replace those ingredients. And then they discover the means just don't work for that.
This really comes through in some painful admissions from people who reach the absolute peak of financial success. Let's look at J. Paul Getty, richest man in the world back in 1963.
Right. Getty lived in this unbelievably ornate 72-room castle in England. I mean, the setting just screamed wealth.
So reporters interviewing him there, naturally, they focused on his king-like lifestyle. They wanted to know what it felt like.
And his answers were just universally underwhelming, weren't they? He shrugged off the king descriptions, suggested the opulence brought him very little real joy.
But the interview got really insightful when they asked him who he envied.
Yeah, you'd expect him to name a rival tycoon, maybe, or someone even richer from history.
But no. He said he envied people who were younger, stronger, more cheerful. People who had better characters, better personalities than he felt he did. He actually confessed to worrying that he was dull. A dull person.
The man who could buy almost anything on earth was envying intangibles. Energy, optimism, basic cheerfulness, things completely separate from his billions. The people he envied could have been penniless, for all we know.
It's such a difficult truth for ambitious people to really internalize that wealth doesn't just magically solve misery.
But we see it echoed again and again. The actor Will Smith, reflecting on his journey to superstardom, he wrote something really interesting. He said when he was poor and depressed, he could hold on to the dream that once he got money, those internal problems would just vanish.
That hope, that forward-looking optimism was like his psychological fuel.
Exactly. But once he got rich, that crucial optimism evaporated. He had the wealth, the fame, the power, but the depression was still there. His life still had problems he couldn't spend his way out of.
The dream was gone, replaced by the crushing reality that money only fixed the money problems, not the emotional ones.
Yeah. And that sentiment is captured so incredibly succinctly by the music executive Rick Rubin. He observed, "It's hard to get really depressed until your dreams come true."
Oof. That hits hard.
It's incredibly profound because it speaks to the finality of that discovery. If you're struggling financially and feel depressed, you can always tell yourself, well, once the money comes, the depression will lift. That hope is comforting, right? But once you achieve the huge goal, financial, creative, whatever, and you look inside and realize you feel exactly the same, maybe even worse, that's when a true sense of existential hopelessness can really set in. You've just confirmed that outward success doesn't change who you are inside, doesn't fill those internal holes.
It's the difference between the comforting optimism of the dream, money will change everything, and the depressing reality of the achievement, which confirms you're still fundamentally you, with the same internal stuff going on.
It reminds me of that Malcolm Forbes quote, "By the time we've made it, we've had it."
Yeah, the money didn't fix the marriage, didn't automatically make you hotter or more fulfilled than when you started.
And that leads us perfectly into the next layer of this, the invisible baggage that comes with affluence. We tend to focus only on the upside, the status, the stuff, and completely ignore the psychological and, frankly, operational costs of sustaining that wealth.
To truly get this blindness, we have to bring in the work of the late, great Nobel laureate psychologist Daniel Kahneman. He gave us this crucial insight called the focusing illusion.
Kahneman's concept was essentially, nothing in life is as important as you think it is when you are thinking about it. His point was that when you focus on just one single factor, like income, you massively overestimate its impact on your overall life satisfaction because you're ignoring the sheer complexity of daily existence.
So how does that apply to wealth?
Yeah.
We fall into that focusing trap. Yeah.
Exactly. When you think about being rich, you inevitably picture those moments where money is paramount. You imagine the giant living room, the concierge, the marble bathroom, jetting off somewhere exotic.
Right, the highlight reel moments.
Yeah. And in that specific context, the one where money is the star wealth looks like this constant, uninterrupted state of bliss.
But that ignores the actual texture of daily life.
Yeah.
Happiness depends way more on things like, the quality of your relationships, not being in physical pain, getting enough sleep, having a meaningful routine.
These are the things that fill up 90% of your waking hours. Kahneman actually found that while high-income folks are, yes, generally in a better mood than lower-income folks, the difference is only about a third as large as most people expect. Because the marble bathroom doesn't stop you from getting indigestion.
Huh. Right. Or arguing with your spouse. And that's where that invisible baggage really starts to stack up. We focus on the luxury of the big backyard.
But forget that people with big backyards still get seasonal allergies. They still get the flu. They still have moments of, what's it all about?
People with amazing home theaters still fight with their partners. They still compare themselves to their even richer friends. They still have annoying clients or bosses. These mundane, universal frustrations are constantly subtracting from that imagined bliss.
And then there are the purely practical costs of that lifestyle, the stuff we intentionally gloss over when we dream about being rich. The focus on the luxury ignores the sheer operational burden.
Like what?
Well, that beautiful big house. It's exponentially harder, more time-consuming, and way more expensive to clean and maintain. You might suddenly face a six-figure bill to replace the roof, or the specialized copper gutters on your historic estate. Things you never budgeted for emotionally.
And here's the ultimate kind of bitter irony of climbing that ladder. Having rich neighbors often just means introducing a whole new level of stress.
Oh, yeah. Instead of simple community disagreements, you might suddenly be dealing with actual lawsuits because your neighbor doesn't like your new landscaping or the shadow your extension casts on their private tennis court.
Ugh. All these unexpected high-stakes frictions just dramatically chip away at the pure, constant joy the wealthy person thought they were buying.
It really is a classic case of focusing on the amazing destination while totally ignoring the logistical nightmare and emotional cost of the journey, and even the arrival.
And speaking of complexity, we need to get into the research that's finally given us a much more nuanced answer to that basic money happiness question. It turns out the answer really depends on your existing emotional foundation.
Right. This is Matthew Killingsworth's work from the University of Pennsylvania. It's pretty definitive. He used real-time tracking of happiness across different income brackets. His findings really clarified who actually benefits most from getting more money.
Okay, so how did he break it down? He divided people based on their baseline emotional well-being before any income rise, right?
Exactly. And what he found for the group that was already struggling internally, the ones rated low on emotional well-being, maybe miserable, anxious, depressed.
What happened to them when their income went up?
He found this crucial hard ceiling. For those people, their happiness saw no improvement whatsoever once their income rose above roughly $100,000 a year.
Wow. Okay, that is incredibly important for our listeners. If you're already carrying significant emotional baggage, if you're already fundamentally unhappy, getting substantially more money probably won't fix it.
The emotional deficit is just too large for the financial gain to compensate, it seems.
What about the other groups?
Well, for the middle group folks who were generally stable, not ecstatic, but okay, happiness did see a measurable, steady improvement with extra income, which confirms, money can reduce friction, provide choices, buffer stress.
Makes sense.
But here's the most interesting twist, I think. The one we often overlook. For the people who were already super happy, high baseline emotional well-being, good family life, strong relationships.
What happened with them?
For them, making more money acted like a powerful happiness accelerant. It took their existing happiness and amplified it.
Ah, okay. So money doesn't create happiness out of thin air. It seems to only amplify the happiness that's already present.
Precisely. Killingsworth basically concluded, if you're rich and miserable, more money won't help. It's just too small a factor compared to the, tsunami of other deeper issues, lack of purpose, poor health, broken relationships that are actually creating the unhappy life.
This helps us define the true, maybe limited, and definitely nuanced role of money then. It works brilliantly as leverage for an already good life.
But fails spectacularly as a false crutch for a broken one.
Explain that distinction, leverage versus crutch.
Okay. If you already have the core ingredients, friends, family, meaning health spending money, can significantly enhance those things. For instance, a big house might contribute to happiness, not because of the marble floors, but because it gives you the space and comfort to easily entertain the friends and family who fundamentally make you happy. The money facilitates the core ingredient.
Or like spending a lot on a fancy vacation. The real value isn't the five-star hotel.
It's the week of uninterrupted, email-free time with your spouse and kids. If you didn't actually enjoy being with your family, that expensive trip would just be a miserable failure in a nicer location. If the core ingredients are missing, the money is almost useless.
And we always have to factor in the cost of getting the money, right?
Always. It's easy to fantasize about the seven-figure salary or the mansion, but you have to weigh the potential, often invisible costs needed to earn and keep that lifestyle. The insane hours, the chronic stress, the uncertainty, the time away from the very people and things you claim you want to enjoy later.
It reminds me of that comedian Jimmy Carr quote. Everyone is jealous of what you've got. No one is jealous of how you got it.
That's perfect. The outsider sees the $1 million salary and the fancy car, but not the 80-hour weeks, the constant anxiety, the missed birthdays, the mental load required just to sustain that income.
Which is why so many successful people, once they've made it, they seem to redefine success entirely around the non-monetary stuff.
Yeah, like Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix. He wrote that the thing he was most proud of wasn't the huge company he built, but the fact that he managed to do it while staying married to the same woman, having kids who actually knew him and liked him, and still pursuing other personal passions. That, for him, was the ultimate measure of a truly successful life.
That realization that real success is measured internally brings us to maybe the most dramatic demonstration in our source material. The critical choice between using internal versus external benchmarks to measure our lives.
Right.
When it comes down to judging our achievements and figuring out our value, we ultimately rely on one of two scorecards. There's the internal benchmark. That asks, how happy are you with yourself? How clear is your conscience? Do you feel a sense of purpose? Is this meaningful to you?
And the other?
The external benchmark. That asks the opposite. What do other people think of you?
Yeah.
It's driven entirely by needing to impress others. Think status symbols, possessions, titles, perceived achievements.
And the difference is crucial.
Hugely. When you prioritize the internal scorecard, your desires tend to naturally fall, or at least become more aligned with your actual needs, and your satisfaction with what you already have grows. But when you chase that external scorecard, the stakes can become terrifyingly high, which we see played out in the 1968 Golden Globe race.
Ah, yes, the sailing race. This story is incredible. The Golden Globe was meant to be the first solo, nonstop, around-the-world sailing competition. Just an ultimate test of human endurance. And two men in that race, Donald Crowhurst and Bernard Moitessy, provide this perfect, almost literary contrast between the two scorecards. One tragic, one kind of exhilarating.
Okay, let's start with the tragic figure Donald Crowhurst. He seems entirely driven by that external scorecard.
Completely. He came to the race with massive ambition, but basically a lifetime of professional failure behind him. Kicked out of the military, his small electronics business was failing. He saw the race not really as a sailing challenge, but as his last shot at public redemption. He needed the media attention to save his business and, more importantly, his reputation.
And crucially, he wasn't actually a very good sailor, was he?
Terrible sailor, prone to seasickness, dangerously underprepared. But to finance this whole thing, he struck this deal with a businessman that was just a psychological time bomb.
What was the deal?
The businessman would fund a huge media frenzy to paint Crowhurst as this brilliant underdog sailor. But, and this is the killer, if Crowhurst failed to finish the race legitimately, he would be personally liable for repaying all the funds. The stakes were immediate and absolute. public glory and financial salvation, or total public shame and bankruptcy. Pure external pressure.
So from the moment he set sail on his boat, the teen myth Electron, it was doomed.
Pretty much. The boat was poorly built, overloaded with half-finished gadgets he'd designed, and it started leaking almost immediately. Critical failures fried his electronics within days, making any chance of a legitimate non-stop finish impossible. He was barely out of the harbor.
So turning back meant instant ruin and the humiliation he feared most.
Exactly. So in that moment of crisis, facing that external judgment, he chose fraud. He realized he couldn't complete the race, but maybe he could fake completing it.
How did he do that?
He started just loitering, drifting aimlessly in the South Atlantic for months. He sent fake radio coordinates back to England, meticulously calculating where he should have been if he were actually sailing well. He kept 2 logbooks, one detailing his real, pathetic drift, the other charting his heroic, completely fabricated progress.
And his initial mistake, ironically, was being too good at the fraud.
Yeah. He made his fake coordinates look like he was sailing at these blistering, unprecedented speeds. Experts probably should have been suspicious, but the press, hungry for a hero story, they just ate it up.
Yeah.
He became this overnight media sensation in Britain, the plucky amateur pulling off the impossible.
The very external validation he craved became the trap.
Devastatingly so. He suddenly realized winning would be a disaster. Winning meant intense scrutiny from experts, from the Royal Yacht Association, from the press. They'd demand to see his logs, analyze his route. The deceit would inevitably be discovered. He actually tried to strategically slow down, hoping to come in second.
But it spiraled out of his control.
Completely. Another competitor, Nigel Tetley, pushed his own boat too hard trying to beat Crowhurst's fake times, and Tetley's boat actually sank. Suddenly, Crowhurst was positioned to win the race. His arrival back in England was guaranteed to be this massive media event. BBC cameras, parades, deep dives into his heroic voyage.
The scrutiny he couldn't possibly withstand.
Exactly. Faced with this imminent, unwanted fame and the certainty of public exposure, his private diary entries just descended into madness, philosophical ramblings, spiritual confusion. He realized the game, as he called it, was over. The truth would come out. He wrote he had no need to prolong the game. And realizing the choice was basically between external fame built on lies and internal ruin, he apparently stepped off his boat into the ocean, took his own life at sea. His boat was found drifting, empty.
Just an absolutely chilling cautionary tale about prioritizing that external scorecard. What others think over your own internal reality. The pursuit of status destroyed him.
Now, contrast that desperate chase with the astonishing story of Bernard Moitessier.
The other sailor in the same race.
The polar opposite. Moitessier was an expert, a truly lifelong sailor who genuinely loved the sea for its own sake. He actually despised the commercialization aspect, calling the whole idea of returning to Europe for parades and media the snake pit of modern life. He sailed purely for internal reasons, didn't even bring a radio, preferred the solitude.
And 5 months into the race, he was actually doing incredibly well, right? He had a real shot at winning.
A legitimate shot. He was sailing brilliantly. But as he rounded Cape Horn, the final turn towards the finish line in England, he had this profound realization. The impending fame, the interviews, the commercial obligations. It felt like it would damage his soul. He loved being on his boat, the Joshua. He felt peace there.
So what did he do?
He made this absolutely unthinkable philosophical decision. He quit the race he was winning. He saw a passing freighter, flagged it down, and tossed over a message in a canister for them to forward.
A message to who?
Addressed to the editor of the Sunday Times, the race sponsor.
What did it say? What was his reason?
It was his Declaration of Independence, really. It read, "I am continuing nonstop toward the Pacific Islands because I am happy at sea and perhaps to save my soul."
Wow. He just turned his boat around, sailed away from the finish line.
Yep. Sailed right into the vastness of the Pacific, completely rejected the external scorecard, the prize money, the glory, chose internal peace instead.
What happened to him?
He eventually sailed to Tahiti, found his paradise, built a simple house, lived quietly, wrote a famous book about his voyage, and by all accounts, he was unbelievably happy. He'd chosen his soul over the world's definition of success.
And the irony.
The profound irony is that by sailing so far off course to find his internal peace, he accidentally set a world record for the longest non-stop solo sail ever recorded at that time, over 37,000 miles.
Could he brag about that?
Didn't even mention the record in his book. The external accomplishment, the number, it held zero interest for him. He only cared about the quality of his experience. The internal scorecard won.
So these two sailors, Crowhurst and Moitessier, they offer us this ultimate choice, don't they? Grover's was addicted to what people thought, and it led to destruction. Moitesi couldn't have cared less about the external measure and found contentment.
It's the critical juncture where we decide how to spend our resources, our money, our time, our energy. Warren Buffett famously posed a similar kind of question about this internal versus external thing.
What was Buffett's question?
He asked, would you rather be known as the best investor in the world, but secretly be the worst? Or would you rather be thought of as the world's worst investor, but secretly, in reality, be the best?
Ah, it's a trick question. Forces you to choose between perception and reality.
Exactly. If you answer that you'd rather be the best, regardless of what anyone thinks, you're prioritizing that internal scorecard. Your actual skills, your actual results matter more than the applause.
And every major decision, especially the financial ones, kind of falls into these buckets, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Are you buying the expensive car, the huge house, the flashy watch, primarily to impress others, to feed that external scorecard? Or are you spending your money on experiences, on health, on quiet time, on things that truly feed your soul and strengthen your internal life?
And as we move into our final, really powerful concept, we see how that internal state, specifically our expectations, has this huge influence over how much joy we actually get from our circumstances, almost regardless of the price tag.
Right. This brings us to the core idea that happiness is defined fundamentally by contrast, not by the absolute amount of stuff or luxury you have. The most ordinary, mundane things can feel incredibly joyful when they stand out against what you were just experiencing.
This principle is just perfectly captured by the story of Michael May.
Incredible story. May was blind from infancy, lived in total darkness his whole life until at age 46, he had this miraculous surgery. He could see for the first time.
So what happened when he first experienced sight?
As he walked out of the doctor's office, still processing this overwhelming new sense, he was stopped dead in his tracks by the carpet, just the drab, beige, institutional office carpet.
The carpet.
The carpet. He became ecstatic, turned to his wife, exclaimed, "Look at those shapes, look at those colors, it's beautiful." He couldn't understand why the other patients were just sitting there, ignoring this incredible spectacle under their feet.
He was getting this immense, profound joy from a beige carpet you or I wouldn't even notice. Why?
Pure contrast. The sheer vast difference between 46 years of total darkness and the sudden, overwhelming input of visual information. That contrast made the utterly mundane feel incredible, awe-inspiring even.
Which leads to a kind of painful truth about having perpetual wealth, doesn't it?
It does. When you can buy absolutely anything you want, anytime, without even thinking about the cost, you gradually begin to value nothing that you buy. As William Dawson wrote, all pleasure in money ends where economy becomes unnecessary.
The anticipation, the surprise, the gap between maybe struggling or saving and finally getting the reward, that contrast, it's a huge non-monetary part of happiness that gets lost.
Think about the joy of your very first paycheck. Going from having, say, $5 in your account to suddenly having $500, that provides this massive, shocking contrast that's often more thrilling, more memorable, more life-altering than going from $10 million to $20 million later in life.
Right. The delta between nothing and something feels huge. The delta between tremendous wealth and even more tremendous wealth barely registers emotionally.
Or consider a private chef serving 5-star meals 3 times a day, every single day. Eventually, that third daily gourmet delicacy probably feels less exciting than it does for a child who gets a rare surprise trip to McDonald's. Constant, expected luxury just inherently diminishes the joy compared to an occasional treat that provides meaningful contrast.
So this means a key psychological strategy for actually maintaining joy isn't just acquiring more, but actively battling the hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. That innate human ability to quickly get used to any new level of luxury, which then just becomes the new, boring baseline. We adapt so fast.
So how do you fight it?
One really effective way is by intentionally respecting the idea that occasional treats generate vastly more joy than perpetual luxury. It's like an analogy from fitness, actually. Arnold Schwarzenegger gave diet advice that works perfectly here.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
He said, basically, mostly eat healthy, simple food, but occasionally allow yourself that unhealthy, delicious indulgence you crave.
Why? What's the logic?
Because if you just eat junk food all the time, you feel sluggish, maybe guilty, unhappy. But if you maintain a simple, healthy baseline, that occasional indulgence, the pizza, the ice cream, feels like a true, remarkable celebration. The contrast makes it taste unbelievably better. It's a peak experience.
So apply that to money and lifestyle.
If you consciously choose to live a relatively simple, modest life most of the time, then your occasional experience with something truly nice, a lavish vacation, a really fine meal, a luxury purchase you save for, it feels like magic, not like some necessity you feel entitled to.
When you expect nothing, everything is a surprise. You walk around with a bit of that Michael May ecstatic wonder at small, ordinary things.
And this psychological truth gets reinforced incredibly powerfully by stories of extreme hardship followed by recovery. The ultimate example has to be Ernest Shackleton and his crew.
The Endurance Expedition.
Yeah.
19 months, constantly freezing wet, starving after their ship was crushed in the Antarctic ice.
Yeah.
Just unimaginable hardship.
Right. But the emotional core of that survival story isn't just the grit. It's the overwhelming joy they experienced when they finally reached a remote whaling station and got help. The descriptions of the glorious luxury of just a long bath, a shave, clean clothes, and a hot, simple meal.
That lukewarm water and probably half-stale bread must have been the most incredibly satisfying, joyful experience of their lives.
Because the contrast with 19 months of near starvation and freezing deprivation was so immense, they found overwhelming joy in utterly ordinary things that we take completely for granted every single day because of the contrast.
We see the same principle even with how the rich perceive their own luxuries, right?
Absolutely. Why do rich people really love private jets? It's not just that they're fast, it's because they provide this powerful, immediate contrast with the sheer misery and slog of commercial flying the long lines, the invasive security, the delays, the cramped middle seat. They feel the difference acutely.
But they lack that contrast in other areas. Most people today don't find having a private car particularly magical.
Exactly, because most of us have had access to cars our whole lives. There's no contrast. But go back to, say, 1906 when cars were brand new. People contrasted them with the slowness, the dirt, the inconvenience of horse-drawn buggies. Cars seemed so incredibly magical and luxurious back then.
That Woodrow Wilson, who was president of Princeton at the time, actually feared they would spark class warfare. He called the automobile a picture of the arrogance of wealth, because the contrast was so stark then.
The lesson is just undeniable. When you remove the contrast, when luxury becomes the norm, even the most amazing, life-changing things start to feel completely ordinary. The hedonic treadmill always wins, unless you manage it.
Therefore, the ultimate strategy for fulfillment, based on everything we've looked at, seems rooted in managing your expectations. Happiness really comes from the gap between expectations and reality.
And it is infinitely harder, psychologically, but ultimately far more beneficial to learn how to manage your expectations down, to teach yourself contentment and genuine appreciation for the ordinary, simple things.
Than it is to constantly try to push your circumstances up.
Yeah.
To always be chasing the next raise, the next bigger house, the next level of luxury that you know will eventually just become the new dull baseline anyway.
Because when you learn to be content with less, the occasional luxury isn't just delightful, it's transformative. It feels special again.
It lets you feel that profound joy that Shackleton's men felt, that realization after unbelievable hardship, that even a simple hot meal is a gift of overwhelming magnitude.
So let's try and synthesize the core lessons from this deep dive. What have we really learned?
First, money is incredibly powerful leverage, but only for an already good life. It's a pretty poor and often totally failed fix for internal misery.
Right. Second, chasing external validation, what other people think, like Donald Crowhurst did, is a dangerous and ultimately self-destructive game compared to cultivating internal contentment, like Bernard Moitessier chose. The scorecard matters.
And finally, true, overwhelming, sustainable joy seems to be derived far more from contrast, from surprise, and from actively managing our expectations, rather than just from the absolute amount of wealth or possessions we accumulate. Think Michael May's carpet or Shackleton's meal.
And if we loop back to that very first thought experiment, whether you feel you lived a good life, at the end of it all, will likely have very little to do with precisely how much money you made or spent.
What matters, it seems, are those less tangible parts of life. The clear conscience, the loving relationships, the sense of purpose, health, the things that simply cannot be purchased or inherited.
We often struggle through grueling work, long hours, high stress, specifically to buy things we assume will make us happy.
Only to find that the new luxury quickly becomes the new normal, robbing us of both the appreciation and maybe even the satisfaction of the struggle itself.
So here's a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to carry forward from this deep dive.
If the greatest, most profound joy in life is often experienced when hardship is finally over, like Shackleton, or when something wonderful is a rare, deeply appreciated surprise against the backdrop of simplicity, like Michael May's vision.
Then how much of your current effort should be focused not just on acquiring more comfort and luxury, but perhaps counterintuitively on making daily life slightly less comfortable, intentionally limiting certain non-essential comforts now and then?
In order to truly, deeply savor and appreciate the comfortable, luxurious moments you do earn or experience, could managing expectations downward be the real key?
Managing your expectations, maybe embracing a little voluntary simplicity. It might just be the only truly effective long-term wealth and happiness strategy available.